Good morning. I'm Jim Carefwood with Armada Technologies. As you can see, if you see my webcam inset there, we are going to, and welcome to our Find It, Fix It Friday webinars. We're going to talk a little bit today about connectionless tracking and some other electronic features that are in more recent models of wire and valve trackers that you may have used or may not be aware have features. So we're going to spend a brief moment here today. I'll show you some slides, and we're going to look at a video that demonstrates the use of the connectionless mode. So these are features that are available in more recent locators. If you've used old 521s or maybe a Pro 700 from Armada, they don't have the connectionless modes, but the newer Pro 800s, 871s, and 900s all have these modes. The old Progressive 501 has a connectionless mode, and sometimes people use that just for tracking, even though it doesn't find valves. So, useful function, connectionless tracking. We're going to learn about those functions a little bit, what it means to do connectionless tracking, and understand how they solve some problems for us in surprisingly useful ways. In fact, I've got some recent examples that we're doing training where this was useful. And a few things about receiver wands that you may not know. Mostly what we're talking about here is generations, and the original locators, just to do some wire and valve kind of tracking. Early on, there was no attempt made to provide connectionless tracking, partly because of the cost and because of the technology, but things have gotten a little easier that way. Mostly when we're doing kind of tracking, this kind of tracking began trying to follow power lines in the beginning, and to this day we're still following magnetic lines using coils, just like they did back in the day. So we are not advancing a lot of that kind of technology, but with this modern electronics improve, we get some really nice functions out of these handheld locators. What I've done here is shown a little bit of a chart that kind of the whole spectrum, all the way from just finding power hum to track power lines, which we still do, and all the way up to tailored tracking that you can spend thousands of dollars on a locator for. What we're talking about today is the move from basic trackers to trackers that have connectionless modes. We're not getting into the automatic digital depth detection, other kinds of things you can pay serious money for. We're talking about something fairly simple that's available today. And as I said, we're still doing following of magnetic field lines around traced wires and pipes using a magnetic antenna. So the word, operative word for today is induction. Induction is the magnetic term that we use to refer to detecting fields at a distance. Here's a diagram that shows you the common sort of a setup that we use, a receiver that has a coil antenna on the end of it and an amplifier so you can hear the signals that the coil picks up. Then we have a transmitter that puts a pulsing current on the traced wire so we can pick it up with the coil antenna. So we've connected it, as you see in this diagram, to a traced wire, put a ground stake in to create a loop so the current can flow out through the wire and back through the earth, and then we follow it using the coil antenna on the end of the receiver. Sometimes call that the receiver wand, the combination of the receiver and the antenna. The usual tracking method, of course, for this sort of thing is connecting to the wire, putting in a ground stake, hooking the locator up to it, putting the pulsing magnetic signal out on this traced wire that flows back through the earth, and then we start locating. If we get a good loop, this pulsing magnetic field, then we will get a good locate. Anytime you're not being able to do a good locate, it's usually because this loop has not been established. Whatever we're doing with the signal and wherever we're going with it, we're picking it up with this receiver wand, which has an electronic receiver amplifier on it and a magnetic antenna coil at the end. And it is picking up the signal that's being pulsed down our tracked wire and giving it to us in audible form. So we're literally walking along with this wand, almost like a metal detector, and sweeping the ground looking for where this magnetic field is, and that is the basic method of tracking the signal. We should say that just when we always use the receiver in that inductive mode in order to find the coils or find the signal around the wires or pipes we're tracing, what some people may not realize, we can actually apply the tracing signal to the wires or pipes inductively as well. That means a completely connectionless sort of a system. We are not touching the wire, we're just putting the signal on the wire and picking it up by getting near it with our receiver antenna. Very kind of a useful way of doing things depending on the job you're trying to do. In this case, the two primary methods for doing that kind of thing are using a clamp, clamping over the pipe or the wire in question and putting the signal on it that way, And the other method is by putting a transmitting coil close to the things we're tracing. That is induction by broadcast antenna, as we say with our products. So in order for these things to work, we have to jump the signal frequency way up almost to the radio spectrum in order to get it to couple the waves into the things we're tracing. So when we are doing this kind of tracing, we typically go to an inductive tracing mode. And in the case of Armada products, it's 175 kilohertz. And that is a handy frequency, and magnetic fields that are coming from our clamp and from our antenna are readily picked up by the wires and pipes nearby, and we can then do some following on them. Whether you have a clamp or a broadcast antenna depends a little bit on the model you have. In the case of our Pro 800 and all our whole series, we have broadcast antennas built into the base. So the broadcast mode always works. Some models also have a clamp. If you have an old Progressive 501, it has both the broadcast antenna and the clamp, and you can use that to do some wire tracking and path following, although it is no good for finding valves, I should say, because of its very high frequency. Here to illustrate is a locator that has inductive mode, and both for receiving and for transmitting, as well as a conventional clip-on mode. That receiver wand on the left there has the receiver electronics in the coil, antennas in the tip that we use to connectionlessly follow the path of the wire we're going on. Although this unit can be directly clipped to a wire like you're used to seeing, it doesn't have to be. It has a broadcast antenna built into it so that it can be coupled into adjacent pipes and wires, and by laying it nearby, and it may have a clamp, depending on the option you choose, so you can couple the signal onto the pipe or wire by clamping around the outside of it. And we've got a little video that's going to provide some demonstration on that. But the real usefulness of this kind of thing is when you're not able to actually connect easily to the pipe or to the wire, or there's a dangerous voltage on it. In a recent training session that I did, we were going to try to connect to an irrigation system and track wires and valves from the main source, but it turned out the controller was in a locked room and no one had a key. We still wanted to map out the irrigation wires in a lawn and garden area near the training center, so I was able to go out, locate a valve box in the grass, put this Pro 800 locator in the broadcast mode, lay it on top of the valve box, and then walk the circle around the outside of the saturation zone, pick up the path of the wires, and then by moving the box of the Pro 800 from place to place along the irrigation valve system, we were able to map out the entire series of wires in the back area without even finding the controller. Really pretty useful kind of a thing to be able to do, especially if you maybe on a new property you don't know where everything is. You can use these things to help map out the system. That broadcast antenna is built into the base of the locator box that you see. In the case of the Pro 800 here, it's in that little round space that's underneath where the headset goes. Some people who buy this product don't realize that it's not just a locator, it's also a locator with connectionless capability. When you lay this box, power it up in the broadcast mode, lay it on top of the ground in a flat mode, anything that passes through the magnetic donut field that we create with this box will pick up the signal, and we can track everything. If we want to track just, if it's cluttered and we only want to track one or two things, we can stand this box on end, and that donut signal is now standing on its edge, if you can imagine that, and only the things that cut across the donut actually pick up the transmit signal. Pretty nifty capability. Every Pro 800 that we have has this ability in it, and not everyone has used it. Looking from the top down, if we lay this box, and this, for example, at a recent training center thing that I did, if the blue is where you hear tone, I lay the box down on the ground, turn it on the broadcast mode, and for 15, 20 feet in a radius all around the box, I can hear nothing but tone. That's the saturation zone that's created by the broadcast antenna. However, once I walk out of that saturation zone, I can walk in the circle or even walk in one area where I suspect the wire is, and I'll pick up the path of the wire, whether I'm in null mode or peak mode in the antenna, as we show here. Null mode is where there is a dead spot right over the cable. You pick up a tone, and as you sweep across the tone area, there's a sudden dead spot. That means you're right on top of the cable. That's the null mode. You could be in the peak mode, as you would be with an old Progressive 501 or with our Pro 800 in the peak mode, which is selectable. You'll just find the path leading away from the area you're in. So this proved effective recently, and pretty handy technique in real life. This is another example of using the broadcast antenna. I wanted to have a test bed area in a business park that's been abandoned, and I needed to know where the controller was because I couldn't see it. There were a lot of boxes around for timing and for lights and for street lights and things, so I went to a valve box, laid the transmit device on there, turned it to broadcast mode, swept the area around the saturation zone, found the cable, led me to a couple of hunter controllers behind a bush on a wall at the front of the park. Kind of a scenario you can imagine is pretty useful. The clamp is done a little differently, where you have a cable exposed, whether it's in a plastic conduit full of wires, whether it's a metal pipe. You can clamp over the outside of it and induce the cable on to begin tracing on that as well. The only important thing about this is to remember that there has to be a complete loop, just like when we do direct connection. We have to have a complete loop established so that the signal can flow, and then because if the signal doesn't flow, we can't pick it up with our magnetic coil. So in the case of a metal pipe or even a conduit carrying wires in this case, you see we clamp over the middle of it, and as that pipe or conduit passes through the earth on either side of where we're getting onto it, if it's buried in the ground, it has a ground connection, capacitive ground connection, as the diagram shows here. So in this case, we have a complete loop established because the pipe goes into the earth on both sides of where we're connecting. This is a great thing for things like cable TV drops where you don't want to disconnect it, or you want to follow a power cable. You can attach to a power cable that has a hazardous voltage on it, and you don't have to be concerned about contacting the voltage. So what I'm going to do now is use one of our YouTube videos that illustrates the connectionless mode, and I'm going to switch over to that and put it up on the screen. It takes me just a moment, but I think it's a great illustration of how things sound and look when you're doing this.
At Armada Technologies, we get a lot of questions on what is inductive or broadcast mode, what is it, how does it work, what's it good for. Well, what inductive mode is a high-frequency transmission out of this transmitter that radiates out, and any metallic object or conductor in the area that it's radiating will pick up that signal, put that signal on that conductor, and allow you to track it. So in the Pro 800D, this is our Pro 800D, our standard wire and valve locator for irrigation. In this area here, there's a copper coil, and that's the inductive transmitting coil to put that signal on the cable. So to use that function in this locator, I'm going to turn on the locator, I'm going to put it in the broadcast mode here, and I'm going to use my wand to track the signal. Now, with a broadcast antenna, you could consider this a little bit like a shotgun. It's not connecting to just one cable, it's connecting to all cables. I've set it up here against the cable TV line that runs into this home, and right now that antenna is putting a signal on that cable TV cable without me having to get into this box, without me having to unhook anything, so Grandma can keep on the internet while we're doing this. It doesn't affect her. That's the beauty of inductive locating, is you don't have to take things apart, you don't have to use alligator clips. You notice we don't have alligator clips plugged in here like we would if we were connecting to a cable. This is totally inductive, it's totally wireless. So right now I'm sending a signal on there. One of the downsides, though, is because it's a shotgun approach and it is hitting everything, all the wires in this area that have grounding are going to pick up this signal. Number two, when you're within roughly 15 feet of this box, it doesn't matter what cables you have in the ground, everything is going to light up because you're getting the box itself, not the cables. So if you need to track this section of the cable, this near end, you're going to have to take the box somewhere else, probably the other side of the cable where it terminates, to track this part, because right now the box itself, the signal is going to overload the receiver. So let's make sure I've got a signal. I put the receiver has to be in the broadcast mode. They both have to be in the same mode. But obviously I'm getting a signal, so let's go track the wire. Okay, so we're out here in the yard. I'm transmitting a signal that's being induced onto the cable. And so when I turn my wand up, I have it in the null mode, so I'm looking for a null. Okay, there's my null. I can track it either towards the house, or I can track it back towards the cable box. Pretty standard locating. But when I get close to this box, you watch, I'm going to lose the null. Yeah, I've lost the null. The reason, if you look there, I'm about 15 feet away from the box. Okay? Turn that off, a little noisy. When you get about 15 feet away from the box, I'm actually picking up the box instead of the transmission on the cable. If I want to follow it in this direction, you can see I'm basically taking it right up to the house, right up to the cable box. Okay? So that's inductive locating, that's broadcasting. It's very helpful if you want to avoid cutting grandma's cable line. We could do the electrical line, we could do the phone lines, we could do the dog fence. It doesn't make a difference. Inductive broadcast mode, that's how it works. Now let's show it on an irrigation system. This application, or this portion of it, talks about irrigation systems. Irrigation systems, unlike the cable TV or electrical lines, phone lines, is a little bit different because you have a solenoid on the system. The solenoid at a frequency that this uses for induction, which is 175 kilohertz, acts like a big resistor, and as a resistor it knocks the signal down. So this mode doesn't work as well as it does on cable TV or electrical, but it is still useful in irrigation. I know this system at this home. There's a valve box underneath my case here. And what I want to do is I want to know where this line goes into this home without having to use my alligator clip. So again, I'm going to use broadcast mode. So I've turned the power on. I put it in broadcast mode. I'm going to set the receiver on broadcast mode because it has to match. Okay. And again, I'm standing right next to the box, so I'm getting signal off the box. I know the cable goes in this direction. I have some experience here. So as I'm close to the box, I don't really get any signal that I can track because I'm getting signal from the box. But as I go down here, it's a weaker signal because of that solenoid. But eventually, right here, I'm getting the null. So that's where my cable line is for my irrigation line. Now think about this for a second. I'm not disconnecting anything on the system. I'm not disconnecting the clock. I'm just taking that broadcast mode, putting it right on top of the valve box, and I'm getting a signal that I can track. Let's see. Make sure it's in broadcast mode. So now I'm tracking the irrigation line going back to home. And away you go. It becomes a normal track at that point. You're going to get less distance because you're not direct connected to the cable. So that's one thing to remember. Number two, always remember that solenoid is going to give you a dampened response, so you're not going to get as good a signal as you are off other cables or a direct connection mode. But if you're in a hurry, you just want to map out an area, you don't have access to a garage because it's closed, it's going to give you a quick, easy way to track and map out an irrigation wire system, or like we did before, electrical or cable. So for my cat Mittens over there who got in the shot, if you have any questions, give us a call at Armada, and we thank you for watching the video.
Okay, I hope you're able to hear that and see that all right. It's nothing like actually handling or seeing a device used to get an idea about what goes on. One of the points I should make about what Bruce was just showing there in the video, he's tracking an irrigation system. If you are on a box that's in the middle of a line, you can get a much better signal. If you're on top of a valve box with the broadcast mode and you're at the very end of a run of wire, the signal's not nearly as strong. But once you start to track that wire, you kind of know where it goes, and the signal starts to peter out further as you're locating. Pick up that box and bring it forward to where you know the wire is and lay it down again, and you'll rejuvenate the signal. And in that way, you can go an almost infinite distance with the broadcast mode, because as the signal starts to peter out, you can move the broadcast antenna further forward and continue to locate. People have even done this where someone is ahead doing the locating and someone's walking behind them following the path of the cable carrying the broadcast box. So interesting technique, something easy to use in solving problems. I'm just going to touch once on the receiver antenna switching thing, since it's an interesting electronic feature in these very same locators. These locator ones have a dual coil antenna at the bottom, which is why it's kind of arrow-shaped. It's not true of the 501 as I was talking about earlier. The old Progressive 501 has a single antenna crossways, so it's only in the peak locating mode. This receiver one can switch between peak and null modes. And one of the useful things about that is if you're familiar with using the null mode, as you see in older locators, you can use that. But you can also use the peak mode if that's something else you're familiar with. besides personal preference, there are some interesting technical reasons why that makes sense. As you walk over a wire, this is what the signal response is like. It's in the case of the null mode, where you just watched Bruce doing some locating. There's a tone on either side, big, broad tone on either side of the path you're on. But as you cross right over the actual pipe or wire you're tracing, there's a dead spot. And that dead spot is fairly narrow, so you get good confidence that you're on top of the wire. You can follow the dead spot. In fact, it's one of the best indicators. When the wire takes a turn or something, the loss of the dead spot gives an immediate clue. It's also true when a wire has been cut. The loss of the dead spot gives you a very quick clue. Some people like to do the peak checking. They can follow it like a metal detector and wigwag their way down a path, just following it through across an open area, for example. That's pretty handy. The real thing that people should understand about this is that you can compare the peak and the null modes to give you an idea about whether you have a correct locate or not. If you are receiving a much bigger tone on one side of the dead spot than the other, your target wire may be paralleling a pipe or another wire that's causing some amount of inductive pickup that's kind of making the path seem a little odd. Compare the null mode, switch to the peak mode, compare the two signals. If they agree, you're probably on right on top of the track. If they disagree, you're probably sidestepped, and in fact, the real target wire is probably over just on the far side of the skirt of the peak mode. So handy thing, quality check. In addition to the personal preference of following wires, I like null mode for many things because I feel very confident I'm on top of the wire. Peak mode can be quicker, but the comparison of the two is also a troubleshooting thing. You just saw one of our training videos, and I invite you to go to our YouTube site and see some more. We have some that are fairly short that illustrate certain concepts. We have some that show you how to use the whole product from beginning to end. So Armada Tech is the name of our channel. You can go to YouTube and search for it there. You can go to youtube.com/user/ArmadaTech if you want to go direct. Something else I should point out that's useful, especially for people that don't use some of our equipment very frequently, we make a little application note sheet with QR codes on it. That is on our Armada Tech blog, our ArmadaUpdate.wordpress.com blog. If you have the sheet, you can take a picture with your smartphone of that QR code, and it takes you right to a YouTube video that explains that topic. This includes some Spanish language videos that we have, but it includes things like the video you just saw. So lots of useful stuff in there if you can stand several minutes worth of video. This is in the resource list for the Armada sites. ArmadaTech.com is our main site. You can get data sheets and things there. There's our YouTube site. Armada Tech is the channel. We have a Facebook page that helps you primarily to find us and leads you to the other resources, really. We post some show stuff there. ArmadaUpdate.wordpress.com is where you can download things like that application note. We have a number of application notes on there. We also post our webinar schedule. And I'm Jim Carefoot. I am reachable at jcarefoot@armadatech.com. These webinars that we do, we also post on YouTube for someone who might want to hear one that has not been able to attend or wants to refer someone else to it. It's on YouTube. So with that, I thank you for attending today. We try to keep it short in the interest of saving everybody's time. And we hope to see one another Find It, Fix It Friday.